welcome to both of you. Judge Ramirez, I want to congratulate you on your nomination. You were last before this committee in 2016, at that time in contemplation of an appointment for the U.S. District Court in Dallas. So you are an exemplar of the old adage, patience is a virtue. And I will also say that your nomination is an example of what we can accomplish when the process operates and when the White House works cooperatively with the senators from a home state. As you are well familiar, as are other members of this committee, John Cornyn and I together have established a bipartisan federal judicial evaluation committee that consists of very well-respected members of the bar throughout the state of Texas. For every judicial vacancy that occurs in Texas, we publicly post the vacancy. We invite applications from anywhere within the state, and then the members of the Federal Judicial Evaluation Committee review those applications, interview the nominees. Those who do well in that first process then go and sit down with John Cornyn and with me. You and I have had the chance to visit at length, and the result for over a decade, in terms of at least my tenure here, has been consistently excellent judges nominated to the federal courts and to both the federal district courts and the federal courts of appeals for the state of Texas. So I thank you for your service, and I think given the debates and rumblings over blue slips in this committee, I think this is an illustration of how the process can work and work well. When the White House decides to disregard the views of the home state senators and approach it in an antagonistic manner, that can be an example of how the process does not work well. I want to turn to our other nominee today, Judge D'Souza. And I want to start with a case that has been asked about quite a bit, but I want to go back and revisit it. U.S. versus Conrado Virgen Mendoza. The defendant was an illegal alien. He was subject to deportation. He assisted his brother to evade law enforcement for several days after his brother shot and killed a police officer during a routine traffic stop. So this was not a minor criminal matter. The defendant's role included concealing the truck that the killer was driving when he killed the officer, helping dispose of the loaded firearm the killer used to murder the police officer, driving the killer through Stanislaus, San Joaquin, and Merced counties to find a place to conceal him, and lying to and delaying law enforcement efforts to locate the killer as he moved closer to Mexico. By the defendant's own admission, he was a Mexican citizen with close family members in Mexico. He was illegally in the United States, and he had previously been removed from the border. He had every incentive not to stick around and get convicted. And yet, somewhat inexplicably, you granted the defendant's motion to remove the GPS location monitoring device assigned by a prior judge that the defendant had previously worn for about 4 years. Before granting that motion, did you hold a hearing?
Hi, Senator. I do not believe that I did. I did review all of the motions that were submitted in support. I would also like to note, Senator Cruz, that...
So let me ask you, why didn't you hold a hearing?
Because I had all of the papers that I needed to review, but also
So is it typically your practice to hold a hearing on more difficult questions or closer questions?
Not necessarily, Senator. You have to understand that in our district, I have 1,156 cases on my docket.
How frequently do you hold hearings?
Ideally, I could hold them. It just depends. We're pretty busy. We have a lot of trials as well.
So, but the fact that you didn't hold a hearing suggests that you viewed this as a pretty straightforward question. Let me ask you something. There was some discussion with the chairman about an ICE monitoring. What are the differences between location monitoring by pretrial service and ICE?
So, Senator, my understanding was that the ICE location monitoring was actually more extensive, and if I recall correctly on this case, I think pretrial services, and as I said, I've issued over 1,000 orders, also recommended that it be removed.
So I find it quite remarkable that someone who assisted in hiding a murderer who killed a police officer, that you would, without even holding a hearing, say take off his ankle monitor, even though he was an obvious flight risk and an illegal alien. And there is a real difference. Pretrial service monitoring, the defendant is allowed to leave his residence from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., and the defendant is monitored daily. In contrast, ICE has location monitoring in place to facilitate attendance at administrative immigration proceedings, not to ensure compliance with its orders in this criminal case. ICE doesn't directly monitor the defendant. Rather, a government contractor, BI Incorporate, monitors. How do you explain to the citizens that monitoring an individual who had already helped one person who'd murdered a police officer was not a priority, apparently, in your court?
I wouldn't describe it as not a priority, but Senator, as well, the fact that the ankle monitor was removed does not mean that pretrial services doesn't check in on him. He still has to report to pretrial services as is
Could he have
scheduled.
returned to Mexico?
I'm sorry.
Could he have returned to Mexico?
I doubt it because ICE had the other monitor on him.
Thank you.